I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast hosted by me, Erin Jane, where we have conversations about what it's like to perform a first responder role and the mental health challenges that can accompany it. Let's get started.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I'm your host, Erin Jane. This is a first responder mental health podcast. And today we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Beata. So Beata is a former Beata is a former crisis counsellor at a suicide prevention organisation here in Boston, and she's currently a registered nurse working at an ED department in one of the major hospitals downtown in Boston. Welcome, Beata.
Thank you.
So today we've got her here to have a chat about her experience at the crisis counselling organisation and as well as her role now in nursing in the ED department. So Beata, I guess probably to get started, I'd love to chat to you about what drew you to working at the crisis counselling organisation.
So honestly, for me, it was trying to figure out a career.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to decide between social work and nursing, and the organization had training for volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it would be a good way to kind of get a little bit of a glimpse into what social workers may do and kind of what that life might be like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started as a volunteer, and that's kind of what brought me in. And then while I was there, I enjoyed the work, and I ended up getting, a staff position, and then got promoted, and then started training the other volunteers at the organization.
Yep.
So, but that's originally what started it and what drew me to it.
Okay. And what were you doing before that?
I was in the veterinary field, actually.
Oh, wow.
So I was a vet tech. I always thought I was going to help animals and not humans, but but then my own personal medical things happened, and I had to kind of reassess what's feasible, what's not, and what I could do and what I couldn't do. And then also what I could do in terms of schooling and the debt that would put me in and all of that. Like I had to think about all of that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was trying to decide nursing or social work, because both are 2-year programs. Both sometimes you can do part-time. And then if you wanted to do further schooling, you could potentially do that part-time. So I just thought that if my own medical stuff kind of deteriorates, I could potentially be doing further things while working. So I would come out with less debt.
Yeah.
And then I wouldn't be leaving such a high burden for anybody.
Yeah.
If things went like south.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really like an interesting perspective, especially in this country where schooling is so incredibly expensive. Like that is something that, actually comes into play when you're looking at your future and your career. Like that's also something that you have to take into account, like the financial aspect of how many years it's going to take to go to school and what you're going to earn potentially on like the other side of it too.
Right. Because like I wasn't someone who graduated high school and immediately went to school. I was someone who graduated high school. My dad passed away senior year of college, and I left college because I just wasn't ready for it either. And then trying to figure it out. So I was already an older student, and then thinking about, okay, I need to think about like what I can afford to do. Yeah. And also then had to consider my medical stuff. And if I wouldn't respond appropriately to treatments, like what would happen? Yeah. So it was just a shift in life a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. And obviously, learning to figure out your life after your dad had passed away and the grieving process, I think that would have really probably changed your thinking a lot of things too.
Yeah, for sure did. And, I'm still working on that.
Yeah. So. No, as someone who has been like over 30 years, I think you're always growing in your thoughts and feelings and about it, about your loss and about
and understanding about the grief and whatever you're missing, whatever you're not missing, just
and how it impacts your life. 100%. Yes. I stand with you in solidarity in that respect, my dear. I really do. And so you mentioned the fact that when you started at Samaritans, it was in a volunteer capacity. Talk to me a little bit about like the process that you went through to get into that, and what kind of training they provided you, and what your duties were like in that respect.
So it was they're actually a pretty amazing organization. You go for like an information session, you learn about what your role is as a volunteer, and what might be expected of you, and then you fill out your application, you do an interview, and that kind of is you work on that, you're talking and trying to get more understanding of the role in your interview as well, and then you go through this training session, which is multiple weekends, where you get trained on how to answer your calls, the type of callers to expect, how to assess for suicidality, and just how to be comfortable with these kind of difficult conversations. And for a lot of people, it's like how to not try and automatically fix things, and just allow an individual to kind of like talk, because like a lot of times what we're looking for is that kind of like companionship or to feel heard. So it's like, so the training tries its best to kind of get you out of your comfort zone of fixing things and not listening, to shift and to listen.
Or like listening to respond, as opposed to just holding space for the person on the other end of the phone.
Right. And then also just importantly, like to assess for suicidality, because even though I had experienced it peripherally in my life, like I had never assessed somebody for suicide. I never had those conversations before. So, so I did that, and then you do your on the phone training, and then you're answering calls. And at that time, Samaritans was also starting with their texting services. So then I was like participating with that as well. And like, so that's essentially what it was, just answering these calls, and more often than not, just talking to people who really just needed somebody to talk to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you sort of find yourself having a preference for either communicating on the phone or like via text, or it was sort of much of a muchness for you?
For me, it was a little bit similar. It was interesting that I found that people were sometimes a lot more comfortable over text to just quickly say what they were feeling. Where we're over the phone, it took like a little bit
emotional
longer.
Vomit out of like everything.
Where sometimes to actually say it, like verbally say it, can be more difficult for somebody, where to type it out, I don't know, it's like a level once removed. I'm not sure, So I found that was pretty interesting. And it was also interesting to just, I feel like I can actually text better now, because I feel like I have the capacity to be a little bit more conversational over text, where some people can't. So you get that person who just texts you and it's like very stiff or like whatever it might be, and like I feel like I can have almost like a verbal conversation.
And especially like approach like a difficult conversation, or asking someone a difficult question, and like frame it in that certain way
to like soften it, so it's not quite so harsh,
not quite like delivering a shit sandwich, but like a little bit like that,
right? Literally.
It's my favorite flow with my husband. I still don't think he knows. And so for anyone who may have listened to any previous podcasts that we've done on here, that's actually where Beata and I met, was at the suicide prevention organization. So how long did you work there for in the end?
I think like 5 years in different roles. I volunteer, and then I got a role with their texting service as like a coordinator. And then I got a managerial role with the texting service. And then I did a lateral move to a managerial role with just training and quality improvement of like the volunteers,
Yeah.
like all the volunteers.
Yeah.
So
I think that's probably at the stage where I came in, because I worked there for like a couple of years, all inclusive with the volunteer aspect and all that kind of thing. And I think you were doing that. And did you do rostering and stuff, or did you do rostering at all, or no?
Rostering in what sense?
Like helping plug in like
schedules
yeah
stuff? Oh yeah.
Yeah, rostering and scheduling, sorry.
I'm like, you Aussies.
But come on, you know me long enough now. You should be able to quantify my accent, babe.
I should. No, it's just the rostering. I don't think I've ever heard you use that word, actually. You know, there are certain words that I
switch on my American dictionary, my American thesaurus in my brain.
No, yeah, because the way Samaritans was that all staff would be the people to respond. So if there wasn't someone who typically would man that email, I would be on it.
Yeah.
And so I would respond. So.
Yeah. And so that organization itself was literally, besides those specific roles, like you were talking about that you sort of stepped into, obviously the complete cogs that make everything work are paid positions, but the kind of boots on the ground is literally just all volunteers. So it was people who were answering your phone call. 9 times out of 10 was, someone who was donating and giving their time because they believed in that cause and in helping people dealing with suicidal ideation or even just feeling lonely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I would kind of say from my experience, more of the calls that you get aren't necessarily someone in the capacity of, I guess what you imagine to be at that really far, you know, teetering on the edge of the cliff about wanting to, take their own life. A lot more of the mass calls and texts you got were just kind of people who were lonely.
Yeah, going through something, feeling like they had no one to talk to.
Yeah, no support,
or not just wanting to burden their support, or
100%.
Maybe not feeling like they could talk to their support about that. Some people do have support, but they just, people don't always allow the difficult conversations. So sometimes they don't think that they could go to that person.
Yeah.
They've never talked to them that. So,
and I think that's an interesting aspect too. So I think for me in my personal life, sometimes something doesn't feel real until I tell a very specific person in my life.
Yeah.
And then kind of admitting it to that person makes it real.
Yeah.
So I think as well, having that freedom to say something that would either potentially really hurt or make them worry or break their heart, to explain to a loved one I'm I feel suicidal, I don't know if I want to be here anymore, I'm in so much psychological pain. But then talking to a stranger who has just got no advice, they're not going to try to fix it. Just all they've literally got to offer you is empathy and an ear to listen, to let you just, word vomit it out. I think that in itself held a lot of power for people.
Right. And then if something goes wrong, I think a lot of us fear that we're going to be judged for whatever we've done or experienced. So then if we go and we're just oh, I got myself into a lot of debt, I'm having trouble with this, then we think that a family member will be or somebody will be how did you let this happen?
Yeah.
Why were you so stupid?
Yeah.
Kind of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where it's that's not what you need in that time. What you need is just the support to kind of see if you can find a way to get yourself out of the rabbit hole. So sometimes just having that, with the phone call.
Yeah.
Just helps.
Yeah.
You're not going to be judged.
Yeah. And even just kind of helping them talk through, I think at times I might have helped people kind of get up the confidence to have that conversation with a loved one. Yeah. And it was they were dipping their toe in the water just by actually, learning what words that they actually wanted to say.
Yeah. Oftentimes there's that, if you would have this conversation with that person, what would you like to say? and then they can test it out on you,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
And as well, you know, we used to have like a list of resources that we could give to people
Potentially
calling.
offer,
yeah. And especially, you know, like if you got a caller and they were really experiencing some like high suicidal ideation, and they may have, you know, thought about a method, whether they had access to that method or not, you know, it would depend on the situation. But sometimes like there was just like a certain amount of relief with them kind of in the, you know, they'd be like, oh, like I feel better, like having gotten out, talk to you. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. But like, let's try to put something, at least a little bit of something in place that now we're not just going to get off the phone and you're going to feel back to how you were. And I think that was also, you know, an important aspect that I always felt that I wanted to really try to give them like something for after our phone call, not just, oh, hey, call back if you need to.
Right.
Because obviously they were never guaranteed to speak to us ever again.
Right.
But I feel like, yeah, that was also something kind of important. And people would call up for, you know, could be for a domestic violence related reason. They may have been sexually assaulted and not know who to talk to, where to turn. So when we, you know, had like, I just remember giant binders like full of, you know, and then I think I even had just there were ones that weren't in the binders, but then you know, the people that you worked with sort of on a regular basis, it'd be like they might overhear kind of conversation and be like, oh, like here, like, you know, this is a really good one. So I even just had like a draft email of like all these kind of services and stuff that, and because, you know, especially if you were texting, you can literally like send someone the link to this website, that website, this organization, that organization, which I sort of always felt was a really good part of what we did there.
Yeah, for sure.
And did you ever have anything to do with the grief support services that they offered at Samaritans?
Not often. I would help. They would have an annual
remembrance.
Yeah, an annual remembrance for individuals where it would be held like around the same time every year, and people could come and they could remember their loved one, and there were different ways that they could like honor that loved one. And it would be either putting something into this little kind of book or actually choosing to speak out at the event, or play a piece, or just have music played, or have somebody else read something on their behalf. There was all these things that they had. And so I would help with that. But the meetings, the way the, you know, services worked was that also was volunteer based, and it was loss survivors helping loss survivors. And I'm not actually a suicide loss survivor. I haven't lost anyone to suicide. So I just didn't fit in that role. But I mean, I would obviously support my coworkers, and then I would go to this annual event and I would help them put it together to make sure that it tries to run as smoothly as possible, so that those that do go can have it be the best experience for what it is. But have it run smoothly.
Help it feel beneficial in that respect.
Correct. So that's how I would help.
I think I attended one of those, like, as in, I think I worked one 1 year, and it was held at, I want to say it was like at a church, but I think it was like a multi-denominational church, so that everyone kind of felt welcome. And like you said, there was a memorial or remembrance book. And like you said, people got up and could read like maybe a letter to the person that they'd lost, play a song, you know, maybe read that person's favorite poem or something like that. And it was, you know, it's an interesting community because everyone there is bound and joined, like you're all strangers, but there is this really unique connection, I think, that people feel when you have lost someone in the same way as someone else. And as well, it's such a topic that makes so many people feel uncomfortable. And it's, you know, if you lose someone and say it's I don't know, like to cancer, or like, you know, which is obviously something that most people have lost someone to, like there is a lot of camaraderie in response to that, because a lot of people have gone through it, and they may know the process, but it's so widely spoken about that I feel like there's like a more of a comfort level about people talking about that. Whereas, you know, even like from my personal experience, like when someone will ask you, oh, how did so-and-so die? And if you say, oh, by suicide, or they took their own life, or they completed suicide, whatever language people feel comfortable using, like it is literally a hard fucking stop. To that conversation, because they are, and often unless they've actually had that type of loss themselves, where they will feel more comfortable to discuss it with you, it makes people so uncomfortable, and they don't know what to say, they don't know where to go with it, and it's challenging, I think, in that respect.
I think it's because like I mean, and obviously, like I can be completely wrong. I haven't experienced it myself, but I just, through what I've seen and based on my work, I used to always talk with my volunteers about like how it seems to be human nature to blame something when something goes wrong. And so I feel like when it comes to suicide or suicidality, it's like, who do you blame? And it's like, what gets blamed? And sometimes, you know, people will blame themselves. Like, I could have done more. And then, or, you know, they'll blame that person for not getting the help that they needed, or whatever it might be. But there's this like weird place, like, you know, if someone dies from cancer, you blame the disease. And it's like, oh, that's just a disease. Like, it's not anyone's fault. Like it's not like, right. But then when it comes to like suicidality, it's like you know, yes, there's the mental health, like disorder, disease that someone could be suffering from. But then they're like, people don't always go there to blame like the depression. Like sometimes I feel like they have to blame like an individual. Like, and so then they don't want to have that conversation. Like they don't want to, and I don't know, I can be, you know, like I said, I can be completely wrong. This is just like my observance, where I just feel like that also is, you know, it's not this kind of external thing. It's like there's an internal thing, whether it's like a mental health thing, which no one's comfortable talking about, or whether it's like them thinking like, well, what did you not do to help your, you know, help your loved one? So it's like people just don't. And then, but it's, you know, the fact of the matter is that you can do everything in your power and still get the same outcome. And all you do is you try and do what you're capable of doing and hope that you don't get that outcome. You know, but it's just like, it's hard. And I do feel like with suicide, just like with any kind of mental health issue, I feel like a lot of people struggle to understand what that's like. And it's very hard for individuals who don't experience those things to be able to empathize. It is very hard for someone who's never suffered from depression to try and understand what it feels like to be in the dark and feel unmotivated, and then feel guilty for being unmotivated. 100%. And then like they can't fathom it. It's very hard for someone who doesn't suffer from anxiety to actually recognize what that feels like. You know, they can tap into maybe like what it's like to feel like nervous and maybe a little bit like anxious, but that's different than someone who suffers from like full on anxiety. And it's very hard for them. It's very hard for that individual who never has those issues to empathize. So,
that's a really,
and like
really
tap
valid
into
point.
that, tap into those emotions. Like as best as they try, it's very difficult. You know?
No, 100%. And very much like especially like, I think like a mindset, like with when you were talking about like they actually just cannot wrap their head around the idea of someone feeling really like anxious to the point of suffering anxiety or sad, you know, or down or numb, you know, to the point of like feeling depressed, because they kind of go, oh, well, you know, just pick yourself up, like fucking go for a run, go do this, like, you know, like because the way their mind works, and clearly in a very like fortunate way that they may not have ever experienced that, but for them to actually be able to fathom it, and it is about that mindset. They're like, well, their mind can't enter into that realm because they're like, they just have no conscious knowledge of it.
They can't go into when it feels debilitating, and they can't go into when it just doesn't go away.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
for them, they might experience like a touch of the emotion, but then it does go away.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like they don't. So I don't know. That's why I feel like sometimes it's just harder for people. Like they just, you know, and people don't always talk. They don't talk about it. So then it's like it's not a norm.
Yeah.
And so it comes out of nowhere. People talk about cancer all the time. There's like fuck cancer, like
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You know, a car accident happens. Like it's like that's shit luck, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like blame the other driver, whatever it might be. You know what I mean? But it's just like,
and I think as well, like our natural humanistic, you know, ability is, or just our like, you know, survival instinct is to survive. Like and so someone taking action to end their own life goes against sort of all of our core basic functionality as a human. And I think, like, you know, what you were saying too, you can be angry at disease, you can be angry at a drunk driver who, you know, hits a loved one and causes a car accident. But I think it's really complicated to feel anger towards the person you've lost.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, you know, there's everyone would probably be aware of, like, the stages of grief and all that kind of thing. And anger is definitely in there, but it's generally anger related to the loss as opposed to that anger you might feel towards a person. And I think that with so if anyone's not aware, like in the community that we worked in, when you were a suicide loss survivor, it meant that you had lost someone to suicide.
Correct.
A loved one or a friend or whoever. And it's, I just lost my train of thought. No, you know, talking about this really funny subject.
No, but it is like you don't. It's hard to be angry at the person who took their life because, like, you want to kind of be mad at them, but then part of you is also then mad at yourself for not recognizing that they were suffering to be able to get to that point of taking their life. Yeah. And especially if it doesn't come, like, no one knew they were struggling. Yeah. People hide it very well. Yeah. Very well. And then there's that silent struggle that's happening. And so people can't fathom, like, to that survival instinct, you can't fathom, like, how did I not see that they were in so much pain that they thought, like, this is what the better option. Yeah. Either for themselves or for me or for the family. Yeah. Like, they thought, hey, like, you're going to be better off without me. So, everyone will be better off. Everyone will be better off. And this is the choice that I'm making. And then, and then that plays into it because for so long, suicide has been considered, you know, it's such a selfish act. Yeah. And if anything, like, and I think you probably would have spoken to survivors in terms of people who've previously attempted. I know, like, I had conversations with them on the phone. I remember attending a talk at the Massachusetts State Suicide Conference that I think we went to together one year. Yeah. And a guy got up and was talking about it and how, you know, and again, all my own, like, sort of work I've done about trying to understand, like, what would have gone through, like, my dad's head at the time when he chose to end his life, and he had 3 young children and a wife and, you know, all that kind of thing. And I think it's such, like, a misconception because, I mean, obviously they're not thinking rationally at that time. We're in that much psychological crisis, but it's the fact that a lot of the time they're actually trying to be selfless. Correct. Like, they're trying to, and I mean, I think I even remember as a cop, like, attending a job with a guy who had literally just tried to end his own life. And we got there and found him and, you know, he was conscious, you know, and I remember talking to him, and you can't be a cop in that situation. You have to be a human. Yeah. And I literally just said, mate, what the fuck? Yeah. like it kind of just slipped out, but it seemed appropriate at the time. Yeah. And he was like, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, ran out like a few things. And he was just like, I just think that, you know, it's the right thing for everyone because I feel like a burden. And so it was just so heartbreaking, but it's so much of the time, like, it's cast as this, like, selfish decision. And if anything, more often than not,
someone feels like such a burden on their family and their friends or their work colleagues that they just kind of go, you know what, everyone's going to be better off without me.
Yeah.
And it's such a sad, awful place like to find yourself in. And then to kind of think that they're doing it in that respect, and then everyone casts them as like this really selfish individual.
Yeah.
Like I think that's kind of one of the shameful connotations that is associated with suicide in general.
Right.
And I think as well, like, you know, now being in the first responder realm, like it's so prevalent in that field too. I don't know if you've found it in nursing circles as well, as much as it has been, and like police, firefighters, dispatchers. You know.
No, I mean, we definitely do, because you know, whenever anyone expresses suicidality, they have to be brought to the hospital. They have to be assessed. So we do have a lot of individuals who have like different levels of suicidality, whether it's somebody who's just attempted who comes into the emergency department, or whether it's someone who's having more passive thoughts of like, you know, I just feel like it would be better if I was gone, but
just don't want to exist anymore.
I just don't want to be like, I wouldn't mind if I went to bed and never woke up, like things like that. To people who are like, I want to take my life. I know how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it on this date. Like you have that just
broad spectrum.
And you see them all in the emergency department, and do your best to just, you know, support them as best as you can in your role, so that they can get to a facility that can actually give them the true support that they need, and get them to feel like they can be safe at home and whatever else it may be. Yeah.
That makes sense. I know it's when it's kind of sometimes like those ones really stay with you, like seeing someone in that much like self grief almost, you know, like you kind of just want to give them a hug and, you know, just be like, oh mate, like everything's going to be okay. Like hold on, all that kind of thing. And then you have to maintain that level of like professionalism when sometimes you're like, I just want to give you a hug. I just want to like hold you and tell you that it's going to be okay, because maybe that's the most thing that you need at the moment.
Yeah. And it's really hard to, like, I find that it's actually really hard to do that though, because you know, I have no idea if it is going to be okay, you know?
Exactly.
And you know, I feel like Massachusetts has pretty decent like mental health resources, but I feel like overall we don't, like as a country, as a society, like we don't. And the way the system like works, I feel like it could use a lot of help. But I hear you. And like, so what I try and do is just be like, you know, because more often than not, people will get themselves here, or they'll reach out to a family member who'll be like, you should go into the hospital, or they'll reach out, you know, that's our lucky ones, is like finding people like that. Right. And so it's just kind of recognizing, and like identifying where they've been strong, you know what I mean? To kind of give them that, like, you know, it's amazing that you were able to call somebody when you felt unsafe, to try and help yourself stay safe. And even if it is someone who did attempt to take their life, you know, you still can have those conversations and see, you know, like just acknowledge you know, you clearly are dealing with a lot of stuff, and, you know, I can see like how upset you were that you did attempt to take your life, like things like that. And then just acknowledge, like, you know, it's amazing that you're, you know, able to now try and help yourself stay safe, and that you're working with us to get you to a safe place. Like, I don't know, just try and acknowledge those things, you know.
And like you're saying, even being direct, and that was sort of one thing that we definitely got taught at Samaritans, being direct in your language about asking. And, you know, like people would call and we would introduce ourselves and ask if they felt comfortable sharing their name. And like one of the first things we said were like, I just want to check in. Are you feeling suicidal today? Are you having suicidal thoughts? You know, that kind of thing. And I feel like when most people would find that either really confronting to say or to ask that question because they're scared of the answer. Like, you know, being direct sometimes just helps them because then you're presenting it to them. And that old not like rumor, but like the kind of thing of like, oh, well, you can't mention it because it's going to put it in there. Yeah, it's like, it's such bullshit. It's like, if it's there, it's fucking there. You're not like, then you're not going to say, are you feeling suicidal? And they'll be like, oh, well, I wasn't, but now that you mention it, like,
or because you asked me, now it's okay for me to go take my life. Like things. Like,
do you find it was something I was like thinking about when I knew you were coming over today. Do you find some of like the training and the experience that you went through at Samaritans like helps you in your nursing role?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And, you know, it's just to be able to kind of like sit and have those conversations with people and let them say it. And then to be comfortable with just assessing, like, you know, if someone felt like hurting themselves and they say yes, to be like, okay, self-harm or suicide. And obviously I don't say that bluntly, but to be able to kind of like understand that there's a difference.
Yes.
And both of those things can mean different things.
Yes.
For what they're trying to do. And so like recognizing that and to be able to like ask that and to be able to, I had a patient the other day that I actually did have to like, you know, like suss that out for them. I mean, we do risk assessments for everybody, but this was somebody who was coming in and, they were engaging in both self-harm and having thoughts of suicide. And so just kind of exploring both of those because they do not mean the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know, so just being able to do that.
Yeah. And that's like a really interesting point. So there's, you know, what a lot of people will just get scared at hearing the fact that someone says that they're feeling suicidal or they don't want to be here anymore or anything like that. But again, like in our training, like you had to discern, you know, where someone was on that spectrum. And like you're saying, it's such a vast spectrum. Like, like they could be performing like self-harming behavior, but that was literally as a way to cope with their psychological pain, but they actually don't have any desire to take their life. Correct, but it's self-harming behaviors. Correct. But then also someone can say that, yes, I'm feeling suicidal, but they don't actually have any intention of it. It's just the way that they can voice or express how strong like the psychological pain is that they're in. It was like, you know, I want to kill myself. Okay. And then being able to like delve into that a little bit more. And then even, you know, someone can be like, yep, I want to kill myself. And you're like, okay. Then you're even like asking them a series of questions about, you know, it's like, well, have you thought about how, when, in, you know, what manner, like all that kind of thing. And then that in itself can, you know, because where they are on that spectrum definitely plays in terms of like, okay, well, they haven't thought about their method. They haven't thought about when, they haven't thought about all these other things. Yeah. So being able to ask those follow through questions, I think really helps as well, because then it can kind of make them go, oh, like, okay, like I'm sort of, not that they're not serious about it, but the fact that like they can kind of blurt that out, but maybe there isn't as much follow through as what they originally thought to.
Right. And then you can also explore like if they've ever felt like that before, if they've ever like what they've done when they felt like that before, like different things like
what
that.
What supports they have in place.
Right. So you could potentially tap into like things that they already have in place, and then also just kind of be that support.
Yeah.
You know,
100%. So. Okay, so we've sort of touched on your nursing a little bit. Yeah. I guess what made you sort of, so you were working at Samaritans and obviously getting all that like amazing experience. At what stage did you kind of go, oh, I want to head in nursing as opposed to like the social work?
I think I was like 3 years in Samaritans. And I was missing the hospital setting, you know, because I mean, I was never in like a human hospital, but in the veterinary field, I worked at, you know, small clinics. And then I also worked at, a larger 24-hour emergency capable hospital.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And actually in that hospital, I was in their nursing department. So like where, because they had techs everywhere, you know, so I happened to be one of the techs that worked in their nursing department, worked in their critical care unit.
Yeah.
And so I missed that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And aspects of it. And so that's why I was like, I think this is actually what I want. I think I want nursing. And so then I started to work towards it and complete like my prerequisites for nursing school, and then took the entrance exam, and then applied, and then got accepted. And that's when I left Samaritans, was when I actually started my nursing school, because I did an accelerated bachelor's. And since it was a second bachelor's degree, I did an accelerated bachelor's, and it was like an 18-month program. And so I just didn't work while I was doing that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I remember that time. You were very busy.
Yes, it was very busy. But I mean, we came out the other end. So
yes, we did very much so.
Yeah.
And so talk to me about, because when you completed your studies and graduated nursing school and sort of landed boots on the ground, it was, I would say, an interesting time in the world as we know it.
Yeah. So it was funny. I graduated from nursing school. I took my boards in like November, and I was like, you know what? I've been working really hard. I'm going to take the like holidays off.
Yeah.
And I didn't bother to start looking for work until January. And so I graduated and took my boards in 2019.
Yeah.
So it was like January, February of 2020 that I started looking for work.
Really fun time in our world.
Great time. I got my job. It was on an inpatient medicine floor.
Okay. So explain what that means.
So my floor.
So,
nursing floors are a little bit different. They can be specialized. They can be like an ortho floor. They can be a surgical floor, primarily surgical floor. They can be a primarily medicine floor. So you'll see your patients, like we saw a lot of like Jerry psych patients, or we saw eating disorders, or we saw people waiting for psych placement, or we saw people with like pancreatitis, or gallstones, or cancer. I mean, there are like specific hemonc floors, but then sometimes we would get like overflow patients. We'd have different things like that.
So it was really just like a general
broad range of like patients that we would see. So we were primarily medicine, but we would also see surgical things. So we would see a lot of people who would have like GI issues, because the campus that I was on was the campus that would have a lot of like, had our GI floors, a lot of them. So we would get a fair amount of GI issues on the floor too.
So people with
gastrointestinal, stomach issues. And then people who would get their gallbladder removed, or whatever, things like that. So I was starting there, and I got like, I got interviewed. I got my job with like an April start date for 2020. And a week before I started, I think it was a week, I got a phone call being told that the unit was becoming a COVID unit. Wow. So I started and so then I let my family know, and my family was obviously, like, back then we had no idea what was going to come with COVID. Yeah. Right. And so, because I was immune compromised, my family was like, maybe don't start right now. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do?
Or like, what the fuck are you doing, Beata?
Right. Like, and they're like, don't start right now. And I was like, if I don't start, when will I start? Yeah. Like, well, we have no idea what this is going to be. Yeah. Like, and what did I go to nursing school for? It was just to like sit at home. Like, technically this is what my job is, right? To take care of people. So, even if it is like an unknown thing. So I started in COVID, and it was very interesting, because completely different. The hospital was completely different than it is now. The floor was completely different. Like, because a lot of the elective procedures weren't being done, staff was repurposed to like different things. So we actually were the best staffed I've ever seen the floor with the best patient ratios was during COVID. It was very weird to be training during that time, because I actually thought it was a lot. There were certain aspects that were more difficult, but then the nursing care itself was easier. Yeah. In the sense that in the sense that, we had the extra staff, we had that extra hands on deck when we were dealing with something like heavy. My floor happened to have it. Now, granted, I was not in ICU. I was not in the ED. I was on a COVID floor with the more stable patients or the patients who are doing comfort measures because the family or them.
It's at that stage where it's kind of more like, which was the correct term, like palliative.
Correct. Yeah. So it's different, I saw different things. Right. But like, as someone, it was just interesting. And then you didn't have a lot of movement. We didn't see doctors a lot. There was not a lot of testing. You didn't really have, everything was over iPad. Like you didn't have like translators wouldn't come to the floor. It was either over the phone or over like an iPad interpreter. You didn't have family visitors. Like it was over iPad. There was, it was just very like kind of bare bones, but you also didn't have crazy like ratios on our floor, at least, like, which I think is probably like lucky, because I've heard a lot worse in other places. But where we were, you had a max number of patients, and then you also had these runners, so that if you're stuck in the room, people can get you, hey, I need this medicine, I need this nebulizer, I need this, and they would just go grab it for you, and you could stay and be with your patient, focus on the patient, versus that sounds like step in.
Ridiculously good concept just in itself, from like what I know of nursing, just to have like those people to be like, I need A, B, and C, and literally go get it, and then so
and it's like we try and do that for each other, like just even now we'll try and do that for each other, but now we're very short staffed, people are burnt out, people don't want to be in the profession, like so it's like you're with this like bare bones amount of people trying to support each other as you're all like on a struggle bus, like through like literally like it's like, but so that's what it was like. And then that was how I was trained. And then the way my hospital does it is that you train with a preceptor for an X amount of times, and then you're on your own, but still in training for an X amount of time. So they work you up to a full patient, like
a caseload sort of thing.
And then, and so you work your way up to that. And so for me, it was like, when I was on my own was when the hospital started to slowly reintroduce like the regular hospital, like what it was. So it was like, so then I was getting used to that, still with COVID happening, but like it was when the hospitals were starting to try and go back to like, okay, let's try and do some of the other stuff that we've been holding off on doing. And then
so like the reemergence of kind of like the more like elective surgeries and all that kind of stuff.
Or like different things like that, taking people on and off for testing.
And when sort of how long did all of that really strict stuff last for? Because like, obviously everyone was in their own places during COVID, and I will equally say that everyone has their own opinions about COVID and their experiences. For sure. We're not saying one way or another, we're just talking about like our own experiences with it. But from like what I remember and like our perspective, like actually I remember you coming to visit, like, and we were like both sitting outside, like 10 meters away from each other, like shouting conversations and stuff like that, because it was like it was very early on, like it would have been that, I think it might have been just been before you started, so it could have been that like March, April, because it was around the time that I I had to cancel my trip home to Australia because they closed the borders. But I think everyone or most people would know how hard hit New York was at that really like early parts of the pandemic. Like they had those giant like freezer trucks because the morgue couldn't hold all the bodies, and we definitely didn't get hit as badly as New York, but being one of like the most popular like eastern coast of America destinations for people to fly into. I think we ended up getting like a massive onslaught, say from like people coming in from Europe and all that kind of thing. So I would say we were hit relatively badly, like kind of early on. And I guess what about like, I remember back then too, like the struggle with like the PPE gear and all that kind of thing. And so either were you getting adequate equipment? B, like, what was it like to learn how to nurse when you're all in like that get up, and how long did all of those protocols last for?
It lasted for a pretty decent amount of time. Like, and, you know, the hospital tried to find ways to like, save the words. The word is escaping me right now, but to be able to like
repurpose
the PPE and not have it like be a one-time use thing, which is what it used to be.
Yeah.
Right? So there, you know, we had things where we had to put aside like our N95s and save it. And then if there was like, if it had, you know, no dirt or anything like that, we would send it to a facility to have it like steamed and like cleaned and then given back to us.
I think I remember seeing on the news that were like the UV rooms, they'd like try to,
and then try and like get it back to us so that we could reuse them, like just different things like that. So it was interesting. Like, you know, I didn't know like my coworkers, even like what they looked like. I didn't know anybody for
that's so funny.
For like a solid year, I want to say that I was just like, oh, that's what your face looks like. You know, I didn't even know because it was just like masked the entire time, or
they didn't do like with your ID badges. Did they have like photo? I mean, not really.
Yes and no. I mean, we did, but still,
it was still
like,
covered in.
And no one's ID badge is really that great. You know, it's like a license. Like it's going to be
either blessed with like a really good one, and everyone's like, "Damn, you got a good photo," or it's like the worst photo you've ever taken, and you're stuck with it for like the next like 20 years.
In my like entire nursing school, whatever, all of it, like I have one ID badge that was like gorgeous. I was like, oh my God, can I just have this like, stay with me?
Need to like repurpose this.
like this makes me look like a model. Like, that's not the case. But yeah, so it's like, yeah, it took a very long time before I even know what people's faces look like. And then it was also like I started COVID and I started working. And when I started working, my grandmother actually started to go downhill. And so then it was interesting trying to like be able to be there, but also not like, you know, I'd be standing at the doorway, like outside just, and she's in the room and then my family's in the room and I can't be there because I'm on a COVID unit. Like,
and you don't want to risk getting her sick.
Yeah.
You know. And I think you were not alone in that, you know, with like the elderly relatives. Like I know, you know, with our family, you know, when COVID hit, I had a 5-month-old baby and a 90-year-old mother-in-law all in the same house. Yeah. So there was, and then my husband was or is a firefighter and still out on the front lines, you know, still having to do all of the things that he would normally do. And I think, you know, for a lot of people, it was such a challenging time because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what to anticipate. People were dying. Yeah. Like, I don't think that can be, you know,
dismissed or ignored.
Like, and regardless of how serious or whatever people want to think that it was, you know, like, I think it was just a natural human thing. Just we were fucking scared. Like everyone was scared.
Everyone was scared, and you know, and everyone had their different level of comfort.
Yes,
and so it was very hard for people to also like recognize and be okay with somebody else's. Like that was also like another place where people, I don't know, people always default to judgment. Like, you know? So that was also another place where people had a lot of trouble, like. Acknowledging that, okay, maybe I'm comfortable with this, but this person's not. Like, and then people also had trouble like voicing, like, listen, I'm really not comfortable doing a walk where we're 6 feet apart with masks on, but like, let's talk on the phone. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like they couldn't always voice that either. Like, it's like people were just like scared.
Yeah. You know? No. So. And that's such a
and then there were some people who didn't care about it at all. It's like, and so it's like, you know, everyone just had a different level of comfort.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you're saying, you know, you were scared or didn't want to go in, you know, to the room with, you know, your elderly grandmother. And like, I still like remember thinking like, oh my God, like I have a, you know, a 5-6 month old baby who I still breastfeed. And what if what if and was like solely, you know, just on breast milk at that stage. And like in my head, I just remember thinking like, oh my God, like what if something happens to me? Like, what's he going to eat? Who's going to feed him? Like, and obviously there are alternatives and all that kind of thing, but it was just like that those things go through your head. And it's just, you know, and then equally like, obviously I'm not from here. And we had just planned to go home and we had to cancel the trip. And I was locked out of my country for like 3 years. We had to go home for 3 years. So like the last time that I'd been home, my youngest was in my belly. I was like 5 or 6 months pregnant. And by the time, you know, borders opened and it was like an appropriate time for us to be able to go back, it was 3 years later. And so I'm rocking up back home to introduce everyone to like my 2.5-year-old kid. Like it was just, it was a very, you know, challenging time, I think, for everyone, and everyone had a different experience and all that kind of thing with it. And, you know, I just still think it would have been an interesting time to kind of start your new career trajectory right in the middle of like the first global pandemic we've had in like 100 years.
And it's also just interesting because like nurses who were nurses before tell me like how different the medical profession is now and how different nursing is and how different like patients are and how patients treat like staff and different things like that. And they're like, it's completely different. And I was just like, I have no idea because this is all I know.
In what, like, can you delve into that like a little bit more? Like in what way?
I think in like, kind of a negative way where it's like, like a lot of people, a lot of staff is burnt out. And then a lot of people, from what I've been told, are just like, I don't want to say they feel like they're entitled, but they don't have a respect for the medical community or medical staff as they used to. So there's a lot of really mean, disrespectful, like abusive people that just yell at you a lot. And then like,
do you experience that?
Yeah, for sure. I have to have like conversations with people a lot of times to be like, I'm just here to help you. And it's like, I haven't done anything. I'm here to help you. I hear like that you're frustrated. I hear that you're this and that, but like, you know, let's focus on the fact that like what our relationship is like, and obviously I say it a little bit differently. But the gist of it is essentially that it's like,
is that from your own experiences or from perhaps what like other nurses have conveyed? Is it like, or did that boil down to sort of, so I think there was like a certain point come COVID where, you know, like some people still wanted to be taking precautions. And like how we talked about, everyone's comfort level was different. And some people were like, all right, I'm done with this. I'm so fucking over it. Was that sort of part of like the change in people's behavior towards nurses because they might have either just had protocols that they had to follow because that was what the rules were at the hospital or the medical, you know, facility they were at, and people were uncomfortable still having to maybe perform those safety measures? Or has it just like overall I think
it's an overall kind of thing. But again, like I didn't know nursing before this, so I can't like, and then like I said, you still get patients who are just like understanding that like, you know, you're juggling a lot and they like, you know, and are a little bit more like, I'll use the word reasonable. I don't know if that's necessarily the completely right word. Do you know what I mean? But there are a lot of people who just are like angry. They're angry like a test takes too long. They're angry like a doctor like can't come and talk to you. They're angry particularly in the emergency department. And so
that's where you are now.
That's where I am now. And it's like, a lot of people are just very like angry. Or, you know, we have patients that are brought in who are like, you know, like feed me, and get very upset at you if you can't go get them their sandwich right then and there. And like,
so like, do you think you walked into a cafeteria? Like
they get very, very upset. And so it's very like, you know, it's difficult to try and like still be respectful, but also be like, I understand that you want a sandwich, but I'm also dealing with this patient who just had a stroke. So
Yeah.
I need you to kind of like...
You should dial it down a little bit.
I need you to settle for me. I've also told you 3 times that you can't eat anything until we get the testing done.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, trying to have that like... And then there's some people who are just very lovely and like get that you're doing your best. And it's like, but then there are some people that maybe the word is reasonable that are just a little bit unreasonable, and don't allow themselves to understand that there's a lot going on.
It's just they're kind of the most important, and that's how you should view it, and all that kind of thing.
So it just makes it hard. But I don't know what it was like before. You know, I don't know if this is always how the emergency department feels. You know, because I've just like, you know, I've only been in it for I'm going close to a year now. So, and I don't know if nursing was different than, you know, this is all I know. So,
and I think it is really challenging. And I think any first responder role where it's like, I just think no matter what you do, you're never going to fucking please everyone. Like there are just those people who, even though like, they are like, you know, the police or a firefighter, you're there because they've called you. Or, you know, they're rocking up in your ED because there's something wrong and you're trying to help them. But then when they're coming at you with like that combative nature. And again, you know, we don't always know what the reason is behind it and whether, you know, something in society has just made people really fucking angry at the moment. I don't know. Like I think that was sort of, and it sounds like you take like quite a similar tact that I remember, you know, I think everyone's always happy when firefighters rock up. You know, I think they're like, out of anyone, they're like the universally loved first responder, you know, like sometimes they're hot. So that kind of, you know, plays into it. But like, as in, I just, you know, there's very rarely like a negative connotation attached to someone, you know, a firefighter rocking up. Whereas you know, in like my former role as a police officer, your uniform could just set them off. And equally, like, we just have people like horrendously combative with you, and you were just like, mate, like, what the fuck? And sort of, you know, like something that you were saying like earlier just made me think about it. And I think it was, you know, not like a speech, but it was sort of just something that I would always try to go along. And especially if it was like a male that I was talking to and was like very combative towards me. As a female police officer, you can really either calm a situation or inflame it. And it, like, the dichotomy was very like, it was generally either one or the other. And I think you had to learn that as you went along. But also, you know, I think if it was like someone was being, you know, very challenging towards me, I'd just be like, mate, have you met me before? You know, I haven't.
Crazy how many times I've said that to somebody.
But like I did it in like the aspect of, I'm not going to sit here and say that I have know any of your previous interactions with other police officers. All right. Like, they may have been shit. Cool. Like, I can't change that for you now, but like what I really want to focus on right now is why I'm here. And like, let's just start afresh. Just you and me right here, right now. I'll put aside, like, you know, any preconceived ideas I might have. I'm asking if you will just put aside any of your preconceived, like, or, you know, other interactions that have gone badly with coppers, and let's just you and me fucking sort this out. And it would just really, like, more often than not, dial it down a little bit. Having a dart with them would often help too. For whatever reason, it would always, you know, help calm the situation down. But I think, equally, like, you kind of trying to get them to have that level of reasonableness, you know, can be so challenging. But I think it's kind of a bit of a skill to learn too, because equally, if you're having a shit fucking day and you are overworked and understaffed and trying to deal with all, you know, these patients and this person who okay, like they're in the ED, but they might not be that bad,
Yeah.
is being so challenging and so difficult.
Yeah.
Like you could equally turn around and be just as combative back.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely had to like walk away from people before. And like, you know, when I find myself kind of getting to that point, then I'll just be like, you know, this is unacceptable. You cannot talk to me that way. I'm going to step out. And then when like, I'll come and check on you again later and, you know, and we'll see if we can kind of continue what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like I had someone tell me it was my job. Like I was, the other day, there was someone who was being combative. I was having a bad day. It was very stressful. And there was like a bathroom in the ED was messy. It was dirty, but it was something that I could take like one of our cleansing wipes and wipe off. It wasn't something that was so crazy that I needed to call to have cleaning services to have. So I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to call cleaning services. I'm just going to do this really quickly myself because then the patient can go to the bathroom and everything like that. And the patient came into the bathroom with me and was essentially telling me how I needed to wipe down everything that was in the bathroom. And then I was like, I need you to just give me a minute. Like I'm capable of like wiping down the bathroom. And then, there was something like a roll of toilet paper that was on the side. And I was like, and it was on something that they wanted me to wipe down. And I was like, can you just hold this? Because I know where to put it in the bathroom. And they're like, they told me no. They're like, I'm not going to hold that. You can hold it. And then they're like, why would I hold it? It's not my job to hold it. It's your job to clean the bathrooms. And I was like, come on.
You're like, actually, it's not.
I think I told them, I was like, I know it's not your job, but you know, it would just be helpful to me if you could just hold the toilet paper for a second so I can just finish wiping this for you. And then the person was like, I'm not going to hold it. You hold it. It's your job. It's your job to clean. Christ. And I was like, at that point, I was like, okay, I'm done. And I walked out the room. And I walked out the room because I was like, it's actually not my job. To clean this bathroom. I'm doing it to help my coworker. Primarily.
It's actually not for you.
Literally. I'm doing it so I don't have to call the cleaning services for something that could be done by me really quickly.
I don't think I've ever seen you angry. I'm not sure what angry Beata would look like.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
Is it like once you flick that switch, it's fucking stuck on?
I have to like, I do get, because I think I'm able to keep myself level-headed more often than not. So when I do get like fired up, like I do try and step away from the situation.
Because you like your job.
Because I can just feel myself like, inflate. And I was like, you are so disrespectful right now.
And I mean,
like, that's not something to say to anybody.
No,
like, that's not. I don't even care if it's cleaning services that are cleaning the bathroom. You will not say that to them. Like that's just rude. In my opinion. In my opinion. So
no, that makes sense. So you said that you have been in like the ED for roughly 12 months now. What made you want to transition from sort of like? So is it a position within the same hospital? Or
it is.
Okay.
I'm still in the same hospital, and it was I missed because I was in the critical care unit in the veterinary field. There's like a speed to things. There's things that you do there.
Dynamic sort of.
Correct. Yeah. And so I had missed that. And even like I actually, when I was going into nursing, I thought I was going to become a NICU, which is the neonatal intensive care unit nurse. I thought I was going to be a NICU nurse because I had a friend who had a baby who had to be in the NICU, and she was like, "You would be perfect here," and like you would be a great NICU nurse, like things like that. And so I always thought that that's what I would do, and I thought that would bring together like my aspects of the Samaritans, where it's like. And my healthcare stuff where it's like I could treat the baby, be there for the baby, and then I could also offer that support to the parents who are really struggling. But the way like schooling worked out, I had to pick like my practicum or sign up for my practicum before I had even experienced a pediatrics course.
Oh wow, okay.
So then I was starting to doubt whether or not pediatrics was what I wanted. And so then I ended up doing like an adult practicum. I had more experience in adult because of schooling stuff. And so I just ended up getting like a job on an adult medicine floor. And then while I was there, I was thinking like, okay, well, do I want to try and get into pediatrics? And I think for me, like the fact that I am a little bit older made me decide not to, because I'm like, you know what? I just want to become more established.
Yeah.
I don't want to go to like learning more. I just want to be
Yeah.
more established in what I'm doing and get myself to that point where I'm a more established nurse, because I don't have the youth behind me kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
is that something that you could kind of pursue down the track if you actually
if
really
I wanted to, like if I changed my mind and I wanted to, but I've also been finding like I actually do I don't mind the adults. Like I do find I'm able to connect with my patients that are adults as well. So I didn't necessarily like feel like I was in the wrong place, you know? And then, but I did miss that kind of like feel like I was like, I don't think I want inpatient medicine all the time. On a floor. I think I do want something a little bit different, but what is that?
Yeah.
And so then I was able to have a shift where I just observed the ED. And then for a few hours, my unit educator was able to set it up with the ED unit educator. So I spent like a morning in the ED and saw some different parts of it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, you know what? I like this enough to try it. And then I applied, got the position, started, and went through the training, and then started on the and I'm in the unit now.
Okay.
But it was that like missing that kind of feel.
Like the dynamic environment. And I guess, you know, especially like in an ED and in a very busy, like if anyone doesn't sort of know, like in Boston there, I want to say it's like 4 or 5 like major
level 1 trauma centers.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yes, I'll let you describe that better than my terrible attempt. But yeah, so like there's so
many amazing hospitals in this area.
Yeah,
and like some of them are just all clustered together. They're all within like
it is like just like a couple of blocks of each other.
Yeah, for some of them in the Longwood area, the Longwood Medical area has a lot of has like Dana-Farber, Brigham and Women's, Beth Israel, Deaconess Medical Center, like Jocelyn Diabetes Center, like Children's Hospital.
Yeah, I was going to say Boston Children's is MGH in that area, or that's
no? So that's the one that's off on its own. But all of those are in that area, and then you have MGH in its own kind of area, but like 20-minute drive, you know what I mean? Like, so everything's like really relatively close, and they're all level 1 trauma centers, you know. And then you also have like Tufts and BMC, that's also like maybe a 20-minute drive. So there are all these like hospitals that are just like in this area, that are amazing hospitals. And I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. One for you, one for me. No, but I think it's brilliant that, you know, the people and I mean, I'm, you know, aware of people coming from like all over the country and sometimes all over the world to come and receive treatment at some of these hospitals. Like there's some of the most, you know, well recognized and renowned ones like in the country and in the world. So I feel like, you know, you would get such an amazing variety, like, you know, you're seeking that like dynamic nature for your profession. Like, I think that it would be amazing because you just would get like some great experiences in an ED in one of those like level 1 trauma places.
Yeah. And like the way my hospital has it is that, you know, there are different areas within our emergency department. And as like a newer ED nurse, you're in these, everyone starts out in these particular areas. And then once you've been there, then you get your trauma nurse certification and can move to the area where the traumas originally will go into. So it's like this level of like ensuring that you're good, like you're good to go.
Like, you can handle it. You're good under pressure.
And get that. And then you get that extra training for, that's not to say that we don't see in these other areas things, but things that are the most dire seriousness and the things that can be
like the Grey's Anatomy, people running through the doors on the gurney, all that kind of crap.
And the things that can be categorized as an actual like trauma will go into usually that area first. And that way you have your like more experienced nurses that know how the ED works. Like, so even if you have ED experience somewhere else, you still have to be in the other areas first, that you learn how this ED works, like how the testing is, like how different things, like where things are, like where you would go if you had someone who had a heart attack and came in and like you have to rush them up to like the cath lab, like how you would get there, like what you have to do. You would learn all of that before you're even in that area to receive these traumas.
Oh, that makes sense, that each place would have its own sort of process and way that it works, all that kind of thing.
And then once like you do get that certification, then you can be in any part of the ED, but you can't go into there until you get that cert. You know what I mean?
And so how long does that sort of aspect take?
Usually like a year. Okay. It depends on how many people you have like ahead of you that are waiting to get into that area, but it's like usually a year. So
are you still sort of in the process of that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what's like, are you in like a specific area? Like, is it,
No, so there's like five different areas in the emergency department that I'll be.
And so, and then you just kind of rotate between them all.
You go in and you see where you're put in that day.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. So you don't even know like beforehand?
No, sometimes you might, sometimes they might put like the schedule up for the next day so that you'll be able to know. But no, usually it's like you go in and you're like, you look and you see where you are and you're like, okay, this is it. Let's go.
It's like strap in.
Yeah, literally.
Is there like one that you love or one that you particularly are like, oh?
No, actually they're all like, they can all have days where it's like, okay, this is like I'm a steady busy, I feel good here. Yeah. And then there are days where it's like, what is going on? Like, what is happening here? Like is Mercury in retrograde? Like, what is going on?
Is the full moon?
I know. Like, what is happening here?
And obviously working in a level 1, trauma ED, I presume that you're doing like lots of different kind of like shifts, like night shifts, days, afternoons, and I think that's where the full moon comes into play sometimes.
Yeah, it's like you can kind of be like all over, and then obviously there's always things they're always like short shifts, so people will pick up shifts. So sometimes you have somebody who's working a 16-hour day, or like someone who like popped in for 4 hours and then it's gonna to just help out. And it's gonna like go, and then the people doing their full shift which is usually 12. Yeah, we usually do 12s.
And how do you find the shift work?
It can be hard. It can definitely be hard because when you work a 12-hour day, your day is shot. Like if you work a 12-hour day shift, your day is shot. Like you're out of the house, depending on how long it takes you to get to work, you're out of the house early in the morning before anything's open, and you're usually home after everything is closed. Yeah. So your day is completely like, you can really do nothing on that day. You get home in time to have dinner and possibly like unwind a little bit and go to bed. And then, or, if you have your family, like sometimes people are home after their kids fall asleep if they have young kids, or, if they have older kids and they might still be awake, but it's like you spend a little time with them and then everyone goes to bed. And then if you work night shift, I mean, everyone's a little bit different with the way my body is. I don't tend to sleep a lot. So I find that working night shift actually gives me more time to be able to like wake up and have some stuff, because I'm not an early riser. Like I'm not someone who will wake up at like 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning to then get something done before my 7 o'clock shift. Yep. But
that would be most of like the population. I wouldn't feel too bad about that.
But my night shift, like, I'll get home and if I'm lucky, I'll be in bed by 8, 8 in the morning. And then like, I'll wake up around like 1 or 2. And then I have like, 3-4 hours where I could, do things like take my dog somewhere, go run an errand or two if I need to.
Catch up for coffee, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And then try and maybe like put in a power nap before I actually go into work. Yeah. Like, so, but it's just like, it's complicated. Like flipping back and forth is complicated.
Yeah. And I feel like that would be, because like I used to love night shift when I was a copper, because you would do it for like a whole week. Yeah. And you'd work 10 days straight and then get you 6 days off. Yeah. But I know with, and say then like my husband's schedule, he does like 2 24-hour shifts a week.
Yeah.
And different firefighters have like their different schedules. But I feel like with nursing, it's, you know, one of the more challenging ones because you kind of seem to get thrown around a hell of a lot. And I feel like it would be really difficult sometimes to like regulate your body and your sleeping pattern and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, where I am, they usually try and do like 2 weeks straight of like one type of shift.
Oh, really?
2 weeks straight of like another type of shift. Like 2 weeks of days, 2 weeks of nights to try and allow like,
a life.
Yeah. But then it ends up being like complicated because like, you know, we're usually like 36 hours, right? So it's like if I work 3 nights, if they're not like back-to-back nights, then it's like, what do I do? Do I wake myself up early so that I can then try and have a day? Or do I just keep myself on the night schedule? And then like, just kind of, it's figuring that stuff out. So if I can, I try my best to cluster my shifts.
Yeah.
So that like,
boom, boom, boom.
And then I have like my struggle with my first shift where I likely will not sleep that much before it because my body just won't.
Yeah.
But then for like the second and third one, then I can have that like, hopefully like 6 hours if I can, of like solid sleep.
Yeah.
To be okay for the next 2 shifts.
Yeah. No, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to pivot to talk to you or ask you about like the mental health aspect of being a nurse. And what, if anything, are you spoken to, informed about when it comes to being in nursing school? And like, do they talk to you about, you know, trying to manage your own mental health in terms of like everything we've kind of like discussed about like the attitudes from patients, the differing things that you see, the shift work, or is there anything at like a hospital level that they they talk to you about?
I feel like they try their best to. I think in nursing school they did a little bit. Honestly, like I don't necessarily think it was a lot or maybe substantial because I don't have a vast memory of it. Right. Okay. So if I thought it was like super substantial, I feel like I would remember it. But I do remember they did discuss it. And I do remember them having like student health services. Like I remember seeing, because they had their like Instagram page. So I remember seeing things that were like offered. And I do think we talked about it like a little bit. I just don't remember it like fully like sticking in my head. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like in terms of the hospital, I know that, you know, there are like hospital services that are offered. I think they offer like when you go to pick your benefits, I think there are things where it's like, you know, you can get these like supports through the hospital.
Okay. As in like specific mental health.
Yeah. Like sports. This is how you can reach out for this kind of thing. Okay. I know that sometimes, you know, we have our like chaplaincy service that offers themselves, social work offers themselves sometimes like just if you need it. And I think sometimes that's just like the individuals themselves that will also be like, you know, you can always come to us if you need to. At my hospital, I know I've seen a few times that like one of the departments will come around and bring like, I don't know, the stress, like poking things and like candy for the floors and just kind of remind people. There's some people that do like Reiki and stuff like that. And so sometimes they'll write that you can like have a sheet in like the break room for staff to reach out to get that done if they wanted to. So they do have these things that are there. And then I do think that sometimes it's also like the units, like the particular units, the nurse directors that'll do it. Cause I know that like, I remember my floor would have things that sometimes they would offer or like have like a massage thing. There was like a day that we were doing something and they had like a massage chair and there was a massage chair that was going through the floors. Oh, wow. And each floor would get it for a period of time. So that you could go and like sit in the massage chair. Yeah. And try and get that little bit. So they do things like that. And I know that like, if something difficult happens, more often than not, I've seen an email goes out that says like, here are things that you can reach out to. We're going to hold a debrief at this time. If you please come to it, if you participated in this, so then it's like, so there are those things that the hospital does try to provide. Could it be better? Sure. Like, but
Same as everywhere.
The same as everywhere. And I know that, like, you know, sometimes they do say, I know one big thing that, like, at least the ED is trying to do is like having people relieve people for breaks.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we don't take breaks. Like, I will eat at the computer because that's all I have time to do.
Wow.
Like, one of the things that I've learned to do, even though I still don't do it well in the ED, is to pack snacks.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, you're there
like,
for a really long time.
Yeah. And it's like, you don't have time always to eat a full meal.
Yeah.
So it's like, I have time to throw something in my mouth really quickly and then move on.
Yeah.
And so then you do that.
Yeah.
Like, so that you can,
that could be taken way out of context.
Whoops,
sorry. Oh, dear.
But literally. No. But yeah, so it's like, so, you know,
like, I feel like nuts would be really good, like,
right,
like cashews, and just like that high,
or like string cheese or a protein bar,
yeah,
or like a protein shake, like things like that. Something that you can just kind of like, you know, have a little bit of, and then like go do what you need to do.
Yeah.
So, but like, particularly actually recently, I've had people who've come by and they're like, you know, I'm here to kind of make sure that you take a break, kind of thing. Nice. And, you know, I've actually sent people away because, like, not all the time, but they're, you know, sometimes I will send people away because I'm like, I'm too busy. Like, I don't feel like I could step away, because when I step away, then I have to come back to like 10 things to do. And then, you know, the other day I sent someone away because the section that I happened to be in, like, everyone was set.
Yeah.
Like, everyone was set. And I was like, you know what? I'm actually in a very good place right now.
Yeah.
And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to eat something.
Yeah.
And I can eat something here because I know everyone's comfortable and everyone's set. Nobody needs anything. Nobody's going anywhere. So I'm just going to sit here, and I know I'll have, like, you know, my 10 minutes to be able to eat something, maybe even more. And I was like, why don't you go see if someone's busier and really needs to actually step away? You know? Exactly. So, but that's something that they try to do, because, like, we are notorious for not, I've gone like a 13-hour shift and I won't drink water, I won't pee, and I won't eat anything. Yeah. So
I can't say that. That's not healthy. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but no, because I was thinking about it, because I remember from, you know, our time at Samaritans together that like the culture there of really, you know, if you had a really high risk phone call, like that was one thing, like I would give, you know, that organization so much credit for, was they were very, very good at, like, and especially I think as well because, okay, like when you're in a first responder role, you're expected to, like, you're not becoming a nurse or a cop or a firefighter or, you know, EMT or a paramedic because you don't think you can fucking handle shit. Like, normally you have a certain level of capacity, a certain, like, resilience, where it's like, all right, like, I'm in this, I've done the training, this is what my job is. Yeah. I'm going to see challenging stuff, and that's just kind of part of it, and we're going to deal with it along the way. But especially, like, when, you know, it was like someone who was volunteering their time, who, I mean, I would say a lot of the volunteers more often than not will have had some kind of an experience with a suicide loss, because that's often what draws them to it. Yeah. Or like how you were saying that, you know, sometimes people come and do the work there because they are going down the, like, counseling, psychology, social work field. And that can be part of, like, the experience that they do in their program. But so I think, that was something like checking in on those people. If they've just had a high risk call, they may have had to call the authorities because someone was, you know, in a dangerous situation and like needed a welfare check and all that kind of thing. Like, I think that was one thing that they handled very well. Yeah. We like, we would make them debrief kind of thing. Yeah. And then, you know, in the trainings we would talk about, like, self-care. And it's like, what are the things that you can do both on a larger scale and on a small scale? Yeah. Like, you know, small scale, just step away from the phone for a second. Go make a cup of tea, go have a dart if that's what, you know, you talk with the staff member that's there, like, kind of steal a candy on my desk. That's why I always have candy there. Like, that's like, I thought it was just for me. Yeah. I thought you were just stocking that up for me. Yeah. But I think that, yeah, that was always, you know, and then I was wondering what it was like in terms of, you know, like you're saying, like, you know, in a nursing station, you're there for 12 hours and like you just disclose, like sometimes it's like, I don't drink, I don't pee, I don't eat, I don't stop for like, and, you know, 12, 13 hours will kind of go by and then you're like, holy shit, like, and, you know, I guess like, you know, you get a challenging job or, you know, someone comes in and the outcome might not be as successful as everyone was perhaps like working towards, like that's a part of your job. But like, I guess, you know, how does everyone sort of cope with that? Is it kind of just I'm not going to say blasé in like a bad way, but it's just like a nature of your job. Is it kind of just,
I mean, I think part of it has to be, right? Otherwise you'll be so affected that you won't be able to do the job. Like, but I, you know, I mean, I say that with like a grain of salt that like, because obviously you're not going to be completely like desensitized to it, but there will be a level of it. And then they do the debriefs and then they remind you of services that are there to offer you support, so that you can get further support if you want it.
And how sort of close generally are the debriefs, like compared to like when
something happens?
So when there's been like a negative outcome,
it's usually like that day. If
so like generally like within that shift, and then are you? Is it mandatory that you attend?
It's strongly advised. Right? I don't know if I would say mandatory, but I would say it's strongly advised. And more often than not, I feel like people do attend because they do want to, you know, because one of the things that we also do with the debriefs is like, how did it go? What did we do well? What could we have done better? Right. So it's like a learning opportunity too. All of that. So it's not just like, being supportive and talking about our feelings about like what the experience was like, but it was also like, you know, how did it go? What did we do? What could we have done better?
You know? And that makes a lot of sense.
What did we do well? What could we have done better?
And so if you like, say it doesn't happen within your shift, right? And say maybe it was a night shift or something, and then like you're coming in for the next night, but then someone else is about to finish, like if they're quote unquote, you know, strongly advised, like are people coming back in on their own time? Do they get paid to come in, like attend a debrief?
Yeah, sometimes. I don't know if they get paid, honestly, because I've never done a debrief that was something where it's like I had to go back. Like I think I've usually had it where it's like the end of the shift or a few hours later, because obviously there's so many logistical things that have to happen. And then also when you are in this emergency, other things are not being dealt with. Right?
Of course.
So then it's like you have to kind of like, you know, settle what's happening there, but then also potentially check on and settle what's happening outside of there. And then you find that time where it's like, okay,
like everything's calmed down.
Most of the fires are out. Let's have this discussion. Kind of thing. But I do feel like, I do feel like sometimes it might be like, okay, we're all going off shift, stay for the debrief. You know what I mean? And so then it's that kind of like, so I've seen a little bit different, but I've never had it where I've necessarily had to go back the next day. I think for me, it's usually
normally try to be within that shift, that shift sort of realm or spectrum sort of thing. That makes sense. And we touched on it like a little bit before when we were talking about you entering the nursing profession during COVID, but I think a lot of people would have heard, you know, in the media about just like fucking burnout, like complete and utter burnout, staff shortages, and just absolutely fucking awful ratios. Because people are burnt out, people are leaving, you know, just regardless of what someone's opinion may be on COVID itself, that the fact that it was a busy time in the medical realm. And I guess like, what has your experience been in terms of like, have you noticed over the time that you've been in, like a lot of people just going, you know what, I'm fucking done. You know, and again, you spoke about the fact that like your ratios when you started were amazing because they could be. And then obviously when you started more working on your own, when you were finishing up your training, it was like obviously that those ratios petered out a little bit.
Yeah. It's like, we had, even though they might have been short-staffed back then, we had the staff. And then you have all of those people who got burnt out over the COVID period.
Yeah.
And we had less patients, right? Because people weren't coming in for other things. So now everybody's coming in for like everything. And then you have the people who got burnt out and are no longer in the field, and then people who don't want to go in the field.
Yeah.
Because another like unfortunate thing is that like we get paid well, but also not that, like, I don't necessarily get paid well to live in Boston.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I don't know if anyone gets paid well to live in Boston,
right? So then it's like, so, to be able to also survive, like, living here, I have to work either a lot of overtime or have a second job, which a lot of people do, right? Like, I don't want to say like anything that's a bad thing, but it's also like, when you go to school, when you get this profession, when you're like a healthcare professional, like, you would hope that you wouldn't have to work like 3 jobs to live where you live and go to work, you know what I mean? But it's like, but a lot of people, so they'll go to things that will pay them better too.
So I was gonna ask. So I know that sort of travel nursing is kind of quite like a very popular option at the moment, and I know that like you've had friends who went through nursing school have sort of gone and done that. Excuse me. Is that have you found that maybe a lot of nurses who have experienced that kind of burnout of working in like a hospital or as an ED are just kind of like jump ship to go do something where it's more
so many people, because they're
financially
like,
lucrative?
Because they're like they're
this.
feeling they're literally like, I'm just gonna go make money. Like, I don't, why should I stay with this organization when like,
and if they don't,
when it's all like feeling like shitty, I'm just going to go make the money. I mean, I even did that for a little bit. Like, I did a stint of like local travel, but I was still getting paid so much more. And it's like, it's hard because like, I wasn't really getting benefits though. Like some of the travel nurse
trade-off.
So some of the travel nursing organizations will give you benefits, but you have to, obviously stay with that same organization and like kind of, and you can get some benefits. For me, because I do have my own medical things, I wanted to ensure that my health insurance was what I needed it to be. So I ended up buying it through what Massachusetts offers with the Health Connector. I got something that I knew would be good for everything that I needed and accepted my doctors and all that fun stuff. But you don't really get a lot of like the other benefits. And so that's why I ended up leaving, but I left it and took like a massive pay cut. But I do get my benefits through work now. But now I'm also like struggling to pay my bills. So it's like that kind of like trade-off. So then I'm, and trying to figure out, okay, like what can I do to be able to offset this again?
And more often than not, that seems to be like picking up like those, working the 16-hour shift or picking up a 4 and 8 on like your days off and all that kind of thing, which I mean, how regular is that?
Right now it's pretty regular because we're very short. Like we're just very short staffed. So there's always like shifts that are in need, and it's just whether or not you can actually like make it or not, or trying to not make it and have balance in life.
Exactly. And are they, is that like a thing that, all those positions advertise and they're just waiting for people to fill them, or like?
So the way the ED does it is they'll email out shifts in need. That need people. That's how the ED does it. The way my floor did it, there was shifts that are like available, and there's a way that we can see on like our scheduling tool where if like something's in a negative and they need people, we could potentially see that. So it's like you could technically like I could technically look at that and then email like the person who does scheduling and be like, hey, is this shift actually short? Like I'll pick it up if it is kind of thing. But how they typically do it is they'll email out like the week before and be like, these are the shifts in need.
And so that could simply just be down to the fact that like someone's on leave, like on holiday type of thing.
Somebody got sick.
Or is it as well the fact that there are positions like as in a U that's missing from?
For sure. Sure. Like there definitely is.
So that's challenging.
It's very challenging.
Okay, I think we just talked about that. Oh, the one thing I did want to, or a couple of things I wanted to ask you about was, we may have like touched on a little bit when we were talking about like the mental health aspect and what some of like the hospitals do.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find like the camaraderie amongst like the nurses and the staff at the hospital? Like, you know, you mentioned that you didn't even know what some people looked like for like 12 months because you never saw their faces because of all like the PPE gear and stuff like that. Like how is the camaraderie, and especially when it is kind of somewhat challenging with the ratios and being overworked and the burnout and all that kind of thing that happens. What's the camaraderie like amongst, you know, the nurses that you find?
I think so far I feel like I've been like lucky where I feel like, you know, we try and be helpful to each other if we can be.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but that's also a grain of salt because you have individuals who are more helpful than others. But I think we usually like to do little check-ins with each other. And like, I'm definitely of the nature where I will do check-ins. And so then that sometimes defaults to the person being like, do you need anything to me? And I'm like, no, I'm actually okay right now. So you try and do that. So, you know, I think we're doing our best. And so we do try and be like, to try and do that. And then sometimes, you know, it will be like, someone will need something like, you know, if maybe one of the nurses can't get an IV and they're like, can you go try and get an IV in this room?
Yeah.
And so, and then, you know, I'll be like, yeah, sure. I can go and like, look at that. And they're like, do you need anything? I was like, will you actually throw this person on the monitor while I go and do that? You know, type of thing.
Yeah.
So we'll try our best.
Give and take. And...
we try our best to support each other. And so, and like, I've been lucky where it's like I do feel like I've had that in nurses and in the techs that work on the floor and in the emergency department and like and even with like the doctors, like you know, everyone has their good days, their bad days, but more often than not I think we try our best because I think we all recognize we're all in the same boat.
And I think that would be, you know, perhaps uniquely challenging in terms of like the nursing profession as opposed to police and firefighting and even, you know, maybe like corrections and dispatchers and stuff, or even, you know, EMT paramedics. Like a lot of that time it's like, you know, firefighters and certain positions in the police force, like you're in a crew. And, or, you know, if a cop, like you work with a partner or a paramedic, EMT, or that kind of thing, like you're often working with the same person all the time, you know, their good qualities, their bad qualities, you know, the nuances, you know, you spend a great deal of time with them. Whereas I feel like, you know, that doesn't always kind of cross over to maybe nursing because it's like, you've got your patients, they've got theirs, and it can be almost like a little more solitary for you guys. So that's what I was wondering about, like, whether that camaraderie comes in, because as well, like with all the varied shift work, like do you find you work with the same people most of the time?
No,
or it's just very
varied? On the floor, yes, because it was a much smaller, like the floor I happened to be on wasn't like a large floor. I think we had like 20 something beds, you know, it wasn't anything like crazy. So like, you know, I knew who I worked with. I knew the techs for more often than not, it was someone new. Like, in the ED, there's so many moving pieces and like, they move the techs around a lot, and then, you know, you're never in the same zone. So it's like you won't always be with the same nurse. And then you have your travel nurses that are there, and then you have your other nurses, per diem people. And so it's like all over the place. Like, and so, you know, I definitely feel like, one, it's taken me longer to know my coworkers in the emergency department. And two, like I could be working with like one set of people like on one day and then a whole different set of people on the other day. So it is a little bit like harder in that sense. But it also is like, you know, if I need to boost a patient, like I can just run out, and if I see someone who's free, I'm like, will you boost this person with me? And they'll come over and they'll help me out, you know? And just like if they would ask me that, I would go and I would help them too. So it's like we do try our best. You know? But it's definitely like I'm like, I need to learn your names. And like, so it's hard.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know whether it's the fact I've like gotten older, but I swear to God, someone can like introduce themselves to me. And then like legit 10 seconds later, it just like poof, like disappears out of my head. And I'm like, oh my God, what's their name? What's their name? What's their name? And I don't know why it happens. But it happens to me like all the time. And then you feel fucking rude if you're like, this is like the 5th time I've had to ask your name and I feel like a dick.
It's like it's bad. And like on the floor, there are ways that like you get reminded, because on the floor, they'll put out the daily assignment and they have people's names and then under their patients, and then they have the text so you know who your tech is. So it's like I can look at that and just see who are all the nurses that are working.
Sarah, that's
like who are all the nurses that are working and who are and who are the techs that are on right now. And so then it's like it's easier to like learn. You have that second thing that's helping you learn someone's name. And then in the ED, like, and also the name goes on the board in the patient's room.
Okay.
In the ED, none of that happens, right? So you have like your sheet that has the schedule for the day, but that's like in the break room. So it's like I look at that once and then I walk away. Yeah. You know what I mean? I look at that to figure out where I am and maybe who's with me. Yeah. And then I walk away. Yeah. And so then it's like, it's harder. Like I've started to try and get in the habit of like looking at like the overview of the unit that I'm in to see the names of the nurses that are on to like have that visual reminder of this face is this person, this face is that person, to just try and remember it a little bit better. Yeah, that makes sense. But it is like, but then on top of it in the ED, you have there's so many people. There's the doctors, there's the nurses, there's the techs, there's the cleaning services, like our service response people. There's so many moving parts, so many people. And it's like, there's the, people who take people for the CT scans, radiology, the transport people. Oh so there's so many people there. And it's like, I want to know all of them. Yeah. Or at least try to. And so it's a struggle. Yeah. Like,
otherwise it's a really friendly, hi, how are you?
And that is what it is often. And I'm sure they don't even know my name, but it's like, but I do feel bad that I don't know theirs.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. But I think as well, like, sort of the nickname culture would be maybe a little less like in that situation as opposed to like the crews and the partners. Like you always just get called by your surname or some nickname you get or something like that. So hopefully that makes it like a little easier on your behalf.
Yeah, it does a little bit. Yeah.
So I think we've probably like covered majority of all the things that I got you in here to badge you about. So thank you for that, Beata. I appreciate it. Yeah. So at the end of every episode, I like to finish it off by asking 2 questions. So the name of the podcast is I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. And that has come about from my coaching services for first responders, and it's I guess my belief in the fact that I think there's like an element of darkness that really like underlies a lot of, our first responder and emergency services roles. And, especially in terms of, you being a nurse and having, people come into you a lot of the time with, either like significant injuries or really in the crux of that life or death moment. And then you and your colleagues are tasked with, trying to save their life, and there is that element of darkness that invariably death brings into our world. So the first question I really like to ask people is how do you hold space for your own darkness? Like how do you hold space for those really challenging and upsetting things that you see in your field, and what do you do for yourself that kind of helps you cope and manage all of that?
So I do a few things. One is sometimes to just allow silence to happen because the ED is such a busy place and there's so many like noises. So sometimes if I have like a difficult or a tough shift, like I'll drive home completely like with no music playing or anything. And I'll just let that drive be just like this drive where it's just like the quiet is there.
Yeah. So kind of like sit with that.
Yeah. And like, I'm not a huge classical music listener. But I find that sometimes like the classical music at that time is actually also, because it's just like this kind of like calm, like not all, but like it is like, you know, and so sometimes I like, where I don't typically play classical music, like that at those times I'm like, this is what I want to hear right now. So like I'll do that like quiet, and then sometimes I'll find myself like I'll get home and I'll be like, oh, I didn't even turn on the radio. Like none of that was, I didn't do any of that. Like I'll do that. Like you know, sometimes I'll just I have a dog and I have a cat, and so I'll just do self-care with like that. And I have my own therapist, and so I'll use that sometimes, and it will just be talking about the shift. And then there are certain people in my life that I know have either seen or dealt with similarities. So it's like, there are people like I can talk to, like in my family, I know I can talk to like my sister, because my sister's an oncologist. So she's seeing all of that. And then like, she's able to talk to me about stuff because she knows that I can handle and see all, like I've seen those things too. But I wouldn't necessarily talk to my mom, and I wouldn't really talk to my brother about those. Because not that they might not necessarily be able to handle it. They probably could, but I also don't think I feel like they try and like change the subject, or like fix it or say something different. Or my mom is like first generation, kind of like old school, like she's a little bit like more rough around the edges, so she might say something that like I would find offensive. So, you know, without even meaning to, like, you know, that kind of like trying to be supportive but not really like, no, you know? So
I think that level of empathy is really kind of important in that regards, like you were talking about with your sister.
So it's like, so there are certain people or like certain friends, like I know I could probably talk to you about things, and so, and I do sometimes, right? So it's just like there's certain people that I know, like, okay, I could go to this person if I needed to, because they would understand all of the frustrations. But or could possibly understand close enough to it, you know? But, and then there are some people that I'm like, nope. Like, and, you know, sometimes it is like, okay, I need to remember to bring this up with my therapist. Like, and just kind of delve into it a little bit. Like, and it's also coworkers, like coworkers, like my staff there, that, you know, I can like go through, like, cause I've definitely had days where it's been like crazy. And then we're all just like, what happened? You know? like I feel like we were just all got like run over by a truck, and like, you know, we just connect on that like fact that like everyone is feeling the same way. And we have that. So it's just doing that. But I do find that like, sitting in the silence and, you know, taking my dog for a walk or something like that.
Sounds like it really gives you an opportunity to just kind of process it. Like you need either that silence or that, like you said, like that classical music that has got nothing to do with anything else in your life, just to really help your mind and your heart and everything sort of just process whatever just happened.
And then like decompress a little bit.
No, that makes total sense. And the other sort of question that I ask as well, which you may or may not have sort of answered it in your first answer, but it's, what is the one thing that you feel that someone else can do for you to help you hold space for like that darkness? So in terms of either helping support you or something that they uniquely can do that would enable you to be able to do that.
So to kind of like what I said in the first comment, I would say just kind of like listening, and I really just kind of want that like acknowledgement that sucked, you know what I mean, kind of thing. I don't really need much else, but just kind of that acknowledgement. But then also sometimes what I need when I'm in that kind of like space, or if I've had like a really crappy shift, like I need people to like make a decision for me, like kind of thing, where it's like, if I haven't eaten all day and I've had a really bad shift and like someone's like, let's go out to dinner. I'm like, okay, but you have to pick, you know what I mean? Like, cause it's like, I just don't want to think about anything. And I'm like, and don't make it difficult for me. Like, just like pick, like, don't give me options. Like, you know, I kind of need that, where it's like, you know, I want to decompress, but I also don't want to think about anything anymore. So it's like, I just need you to kind of like just make a decision,
Yeah.
and not bring me into it, and
Yeah.
just be like, okay, we're doing this.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes even if it is like okay, let's go take a walk, like whatever it might be, to have that person kind of like do that. If they're the person who's like with me at that time, you know, if I'm not by myself, then to just be like, let's go. Like, and then it's like, okay.
And that's actually like super, super common, that decision fatigue.
Yeah.
Like, you're one of my friends who I sort of will know that sometimes I have to do that with. And I have another nursing friend who is like in like a management role in her nursing career, and she's just having to make calls, make decisions like all day. And it'll be, you know, when we're texting back and forwards about like plans, and I can just tell it's like a tone. I mean, it's a tone in a text message. It sounds stupid, but it's and it's like, it's her tone when she's just being very ambivalent about it, or just very like wishy-washy. And I'll literally just send a text and I'm like, do you need me to make the decision for stuff right now?
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'll just do it. And I'll be like, all right, we're, you know, going out for Mexican, we're going to drink margaritas, and this is where we're going.
Yeah.
And I think I find it with my husband too. Like, he is a firefighter, but he is a captain, and more often than not upgraded as a deputy.
Yeah.
So when you are just constantly making decisions like for a whole 24 hours, it is something that I find is so super common with like anyone that I come across in that first responder realm, that you just don't want to make another fucking decision. And literally, and it's whether it's what's for dinner, you know, what are we doing with the kids? Like, what's this? What's that? And I think that's,
I just don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to think about it. Like,
just
I'm done.
one more decision. I'm all tapped out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like really, really common too.
Yeah. So it's like, that's what I would need. I would either need you to just kind of like listen and just acknowledge
I'm just going to come over with Thai food and wine. Literally. Which I think I've done.
And then just make the decision. I don't want to think about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Beata, thank you so much for coming over and spending your time with me. This was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's been wonderful. All right. Thank you for listening and tuning in. This has been I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. I am your host, Erin Jane. Stop looking lovingly at me. I can see you doing it in the camera. Beata's looking lovingly at me right now. If you have any comments, anything you wish to share, any topics that you would like discussed, I will put all of the contact details in the show notes. If you happen to have a pen on you right now, it is my website is www.erinjanecoaching.com, and you can get in contact by email, info@erinjanecoaching.com, and I'm on Instagram. I guess Facebook. There's multiple ways. I'll pop it in the show notes. But thank you for listening. And as always, let me listen in a way that you've never been heard. Thanks for your time.